minds on fire with questions galore. From angry tenants to that weird stain on the floor. Count seconds till our show comes on. We might have answers. Yes, that's our name. Your burning questions are why we came. We'll fix your problems, or at least we'll try. It's time for our show. Let your troubles fly. Marketing blues got you feeling low. Wondering how to make those vacancies go. Career ladder looking mighty steep. Tune into our show, no need to weep. We might have answers, yes, that's our name. Your burning questions are why we came. We'll fix your problems, or at least we'll try. It's time for our show, let your troubles fly. We might have answers, let your troubles fly. Marketing blues got you feeling low. Wondering how to make those vacancies go. Career ladder looking mighty steep. Tune into our show, no need to weep. We might have answers, yes, that's our name. Your burning questions are why we came. We'll fix your problems, or at least we'll try. It's time for our show, let your troubles fly. Maintenance nightmares, leasing woes. How to handle that resident who never shows. From clogged toilets to cranky bosses. We might have answers for all your losses. We might have answers, yes, that's our name. Yes, that name. Your burning questions are why we came. We'll fix your problems, or at least we'll try. We might have answers, let your troubles fly. So bring your troubles, your doubts, your fears. We'll sprinkle wisdom and maybe some cheers. Our circle's wide, our knowledge vast. Let's turn your workday frown upside down fast. We might have answers, that's what we do. Your multi-family queries, we'll see them through. We'll try to fix them, or at least we'll try. We might have answers, give us a try.
So, Amanda, thank you first for being the first official guest on We Might Have Answers, which is multifamily AMA, or maybe AUA in this case, as anything, designed to have people who work in our industry and who are property managers at whatever role, leasing agents, site managers, regional managers, executives, to come and ask the burning questions they have, and let us know what they're thinking about how things are going in the industry, and trying to be a resource that I know we've talked a lot. For those who don't know, none of you will probably know. But Amanda and I worked together for quite a long time, and we've talked a lot in the years since of how much we benefited from some incredible mentors and some people that were there. And this just felt like a fun way to try and give back, because we both benefited a ton from those times in the community. But I'll shut up for a second because we need to introduce Amanda. I'll probably introduce both of us, but I'll let you introduce yourself, and then I'll fill in the blanks on who I am a little bit too. So take it away.
Awesome. Well, first of all, I'm honored to be here. Thanks so much. So, hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name is Amanda Cox. I am the COO of Bel Air Multifamily Management, a property management company that my business partner and I launched about 2 years ago now. We oversee a little over 3,000 units. We're Texas-based, from Dallas down 35 to San Antonio. Currently 16 properties and a staff of about right around 100 people now.
100 people already. Wow. And y'all had tremendous growth this year.
We've tripled in size this year.
Yeah. So, and then we might maybe could talk a little bit, depending on questions and everything that come in on uh, the growing pains that are associated with that, because I'm sure there've been
Yeah,
some.
I'm feeling them.
So I guess quick intro for me, Stephen Ray. I've been in the business almost 20 years now, which is probably why I don't have a chair left, and I'm having to compensate with my beard. But yeah, no, I've been in the business about 20 years. Worn almost every hat in the business except accounting, and trust me, you want to keep me away from accounting. We'll do whatever get done. But yeah, I fell in love with this business. It afforded me some incredible opportunities that I wouldn't have had otherwise, and love to teach. It's probably my favorite thing to do, which led to me taking the opportunity to do something like starting Circle just recently, which is my professional community. We have our first class coming out today, probably actually over the next 2 days. It'll be released in parts, but it's all about giving back. I love like I'm enjoying. I love teaching, but I'm very fortunate to be standing on the shoulders of some really incredible mentors and bosses who, for whatever reason, took a liking to me and invested their time in me. And it's been really important to me that I continue to pay that back, and pay that forward to the next generation of people. Amanda being one of those people. And selfishly, the best part of that is then I get to claim everyone who Amanda inspires down the road just through the tree of influence. It's like I'm going to be the Bill Parcells of property management, where eventually every head coach is somehow associated with me. It's a weird analogy or joke. I don't know what that was. It's what happens when you go live on things is you start rambling into space. But let's jump into a little bit. I think the first thing that we can maybe start with, I'm pretty sure you saw the infographic that I put up about the mini hats of the regional manager. It's probably one of the most pseudo-viral things that I've ever put out. It got a ton of responses, a ton of people who almost, I would like to say it was a surprising number of people, but I don't think it really was. I don't think it would be for either of us. But I guess the premise of that to fill people in, if they hadn't seen it, was the job from the transition from being a property manager to a regional manager is by far the hardest in the industry. And some of the biggest reasons for that are you go from being the person who does things to the person who makes sure things get done. And when you spend your whole life doing things, it's a really, really challenging transition for people to make. And based on the responses to that post, like I said, it's probably the most viral thing I've posted in a very long time. It feels like that sentiment's felt everywhere. So maybe we could start with, you're obviously COO of Bel Air now, but you didn't start there. So maybe like a quick origin story, and then we could skip up to your first experiences as a regional, and then how you're thinking about that now. I'm probably too many questions in one, but that's okay. With your teams. So we can start with like origin story, and then we'll kind of walk our way through.
Sure. So I started in the industry in 2008 as a community assistant, leasing apartments for my rent to be paid for, my $400 a month rent. And I worked at that property after I graduated. I traveled with, it was an individual owner. I wasn't working for a property management company. We had a document that was on Word that was our lease that we edited. So I had no idea about fair housing. I didn't know about anything back then. It was like, boss says to do it, you do it.
1995, I made for $200, $400 rents.
I wish. I'm just kidding. That ages me more. So I would say like I was there for a few years. I joined RPM, which is where Stephen and I know each other, Roscoe Properties at the time in 2012. I would say that's really where my career started to take off. I started as an assistant manager on a student property. That's why they hired me, because I had student experience. We had a small portfolio of deals in North Campus, a little bit in West Campus at the time. And I became a property manager pretty quickly, really rode the wave of extreme growth with Roscoe. A lot of rehabs, one property after another. We wouldn't get them stable in the renovation process before I was moving on to another deal. And I became a regional manager in 2013. And that opportunity came to me because I was good at being a property manager. And I think this is where you find that challenge of, I'm really good at this role. I've mastered it. Now, how do I flip to be more of that leader and not the doer? And that was the most challenging transition for me, as Stephen said earlier. And I remember one time specifically, I was working on a Saturday at our corporate office, entering purchase orders for, I don't know, tile backsplash or something for a renovation we were doing. And it was a bunch of work that honestly my manager should have been doing, but I thought I was helping my manager by doing the work. So I'm in the office, I'm processing invoices and POs and just doing a bunch of admin work. And Steven comes in and I'm like, what are you doing here? He's like, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be doing this work. You should be monitoring your managers that are doing this work. I don't know. Did we see each other in the office on a Saturday again?
We saw each other on Saturdays like consistently for about like 6 weeks. It's really,
Like, can you give it up yet?
yeah. It was, and there's I think there's a couple of interesting things there. One is, and you mentioned you thought you were helping them.
Yeah.
And that's so common in our industry and in what we do. And I can totally appreciate why, because if you've worked on site, you have so much empathy for the people who work on site. It's easy to think and project yourself like, I remember the days when I felt overwhelmed and I had a lot of POs to do, or I had a lot of payables to enter, or whatever it happened to be. So because you want to, be that different type of regional manager maybe, or you've been thinking for a while about the promotion, about, how you're going to do it differently when you're in that seat. And the instinct is to help. And that's true. Like, you want to help, but you don't want to help by taking things necessarily off of someone's plate. Because it feels like helping them is actually hurting them. And more importantly, it's also hurting you. You're robbing them of the opportunity to learn, and you're robbing yourself also the opportunity to grow, because you're spending time doing other stuff. Now, again, there's lots of reasons. Like, there's a comfort, I'm sure, of like, I know how to do this, so I'm gonna gravitate towards doing this, and that's also natural.
I also thought that's like what a servant leader did. Like, what are the areas you need help with when I go to the properties? Like, oh, I haven't gotten to all this admin work. I'm like, great, that's what I'm going to take off. Instead of teaching, here's how you're going to better balance that for yourself. Do an admin hour in the morning, or whatever it was that was a tool. And I think the challenge is like, there is no training going from a manager to a regional. So you're just out there trying to make it with whatever your needs are of your properties.
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels like a lot of times you maybe spend, anywhere from 6 to 18 months for a lot of regional managers kind of trapped in that, what I would call being a multi-site property manager.
Yeah.
And it's the sooner you can figure out that your job is to teach and help and guide people into doing things, the sooner that you'll be able to actually start learning and growing in your position.
Absolutely.
So, cool. So then that was regional manager. This is a little bit like how we bonded, of me giving you a very hard time, like every Saturday for several weeks. And for context, she would throw it back at me, like, what are you doing here? And my response was, I'm doing things to make my week easier. Like, I'm helping me. I'm not doing work for others. And I can say for sure that I think everyone at the company at the time noticed when that switch flipped for you, because it changed everything about not only how you operated, but also your team. So your team ultimately got better because you were holding them accountable and setting expectations a little bit differently, as opposed to being a crutch. Anytime you're a crutch, this is a warning to like people out there, crutches become prosthetics like super quick, like permanent additions. So when you're being a crutch for somebody, you're not really, again, allowing them to grow, but they get used to having that crutch.
Right.
And then when you do shift later, at some point, that's going to be that much harder of a transition for them. So still check no questions yet. That's okay, because we have things to talk about. So another thing that we have in common, that I'd love for you to kind of elaborate on a little bit of what it's meant to your career, is professional education. We're both CPMs. We're both former Iron Austin presidents. What is that involvement meant to you, both from an education standpoint and then also a kind of networking and growth standpoint with the people side of things with those organizations?
Well, I never would have been involved in IRM if it wasn't for you, like making me chair a committee. So I'm really grateful for that. I think you believed in me and had confidence in me before I did in myself. And I don't think I ever like envisioned I would be in property management. You know, it's like the job you fall into and fall in love with.
Yep.
And every time I took another step, I wasn't specific about my goals and where I was going. It was just this natural forward progression. And whenever I got involved in IRM, my confidence rose in how to be a leader outside of just a professional environment. Like, you're managing people, I guess, managing things to get done in an organization that's all volunteer. And so I had people that were younger than me, older than me, all, different types of respects in the business that we were managing through that process. And I think it started as IYP or doing like socials or something whenever I started. And then I think by the time I moved into an officer role, I realized I was about to be the president. Like, it was like a couple years and that's where I was going. But I think the biggest thing for me is obviously the educational path, learning about things that I would walk around with brokers on force, like cap rates, ROI, and I'm just taking notes. Like, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm going to go Google it later. I've got to start to hang in those conversations. And I feel like more than anything, it was a confidence booster for me. I believed in myself more because I had the actual education, and I'm an over preparer. I'm an overthinker in those ways. So I felt like my confidence growing and being a part of that. And then the network of people that I met through IRM is invaluable. I mean, it's like a brotherhood, like a sorority or something. Like, you see those letters behind someone's name, it's like you understand what that meant to go through that process. And I remember how much changed for me and how I was able to understand asset management and property management by getting my CPM, because then I understood how to underwrite a deal, how to evaluate the metrics. It seems like asset managers and regionals are like this a lot of times. Like, you build this model that's unrealistic. Payroll is at $1,500 a door, whatever. And I was resistant to that and fought against it more than appreciated the combination of skill set when I was like early in my career as a regional. And getting my CPM was huge for me to see like the full circle of how to work through a deal. And looking back at those times now when we went full cycle on some of like the rehabs on Riverside and stuff, it's like 35% IRRs. Like, it's crazy. I don't know if we'll ever see it again, but I'm so for
That's not without some sort of tragic crash. But you touched on a bunch of really interesting things there that I want to kind of circle back to. Because I had a similar experience, and in many ways, I was pretty intentional about leveraging IRM. In those days at Roscoe, I didn't have a big team, but I knew with what my professional goals were, I wanted to get better at managing people. I knew that was a little bit of a shortcoming for me. I wasn't necessarily great at setting expectations, but then there was no fault. I just assumed everyone did things because I did things, and that was a lesson I learned as a leader, is that not everyone's me. So I use IRM as a way, by sharing committees and being an officer and moving up the ranks there, to get that experience with a really diverse group of people. It sounds like that was similar for you. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. But I was leading people at that time, but just not with the confidence that I knew, the knowledge that you had going into that. So we learned different skill sets. We looked for something a little bit different.
Which is also what makes it so valuable, right? And I know, to give you a little bit of credit, throw some maybe like praise your way. A lot of things I said to you earlier in your career, I said to a lot of people. It's rare, in my experience, for people to actually act on that feedback. And I know that's what endeared me to some of my mentors. It was definitely noticed between us. And I would like to encourage everyone out there that you have to recognize your agency and your success. Like, right? Like, I know I had times when I was younger, I'd hear this like, you can do anything with hard work, and these kind of cliche things, and anything's achievable if you just put in the effort. And I'd be like, yeah, right. There's certain things that just couldn't happen. But as I've grown older, I realized how true that is. And the reason I didn't understand it when I was younger is I didn't really understand what hard work was. I thought I worked hard, and now I have realized that maybe I didn't. And because it's not necessarily about effort, I think it's more about sacrifice, right?
Very important.
Like spending time in and being in these professional organizations when you are deeply involved. Or I think when I first moved into a biz dev role at Roscoe and was trying to get us our first like non-renovation properties, I was at events and things 3-4 nights a week because I knew I needed to be seen as much as just either talking to people to build that trust and grow that awareness. How has sacrifice played a role in your career? Can you think about, not necessarily like the big ones, right? But it's those small decisions kind of throughout, the week, or that decision to come in early or stay a little late. How has that impacted your career? Because I know you've done a lot of it.
Yeah, I think I've sacrificed pretty much everything to be where I'm at in my career.
So scare everyone.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't great as a friend, as a daughter, in a relationship, like, because I put work first. So I bought into the hustle hard culture, the stay busy, always look like you're doing things. And now I think quite opposite of that.
Yeah.
It's like you have to say yes to a lot of things, though, to get the exposure and build the relationships. You can say no to a lot of things later. I'm very protective of my yeses now, but for a long time I wasn't. And then I don't think I recognized how much I sacrificed until I hit some lows in my life. It affected my marriage. It affected many things. But
Well, it's one of those things maybe in the moment you don't always realize.
Yeah.
I think it's important to put to frame that, also to think about that, because I thought about this a lot too, as someone who really was, I classify myself as a bit of a grinder, and who would kind of throw myself just into things without regard for anything else about that thing. Is that as actually most things with sacrifice, and what's kind of taught about it, is you're doing those things not forever, right? Because if it was forever, you would burn out, and you wouldn't still be in business. Like you wouldn't be the happy smiling person that you are today. So it's very much temporary, but it's also very much necessary.
but didn't you burn out at some point?
Yeah, but
You blow it up at some point. I mean, I did.
yeah, but in a weird way, I feel like for me, like that needed to happen, right? Because you don't know where the red line is until you pass the red line. You'll never know what you're capable of until you push yourself just beyond that point. Because it's they bring it back to multifamily a little bit. It's like these rental rates. You don't find the highest and best rental rate for a property by tiptoeing up to that rate. You find the rate by slamming your head into it, right? Because you raised it too much, and then people said no, and then you lower it back down. Like, it's the cool thing about our business is we can change our prices every day. Most people do change their prices every day. You're not bound to any decision like that forever. The same goes with sacrifice. The same goes with deciding to give yourself some grace or take some time. But it's also important to recognize that there are those who aren't good at those things, right? Like there's always someone who's working harder, who's more committed, who's at that moment in time in their life is able to sacrifice potentially more than you. And it's important to not be surprised when those people get ahead, and just recognize that why. And then, make that conscious decision is, am I still where I want to be? And then adapt and go from there. It's also the benefit of getting older, is as you do you get those opportunities to take a step back a little bit more.
And I think really focus on sustainable energy and momentum instead of going so hard that you just burn out, or work for the next vacation and never feel like you're catching up, which for me was irregular.
Well,
part of my life for a long time.
and that brings up another thing that I've started talking about a lot recently that I think would be good to maybe drill in on for people is I don't think I've said this to you yet, so I'm curious to get your take on it. At some point, especially for high achievers or people who work hard and want to grow and thrive, like if people who are watching this or the people who've gotten promoted to things like regional manager positions or in more executive roles, you're living this already. And are one of those people is the idea that effort is rarely the answer. It's because you're already putting in everything you can. And this kind of goes back to a little bit of what we talked about before with the regional manager and like the switch from multi-site manager to regional and recognizing that it was a change in mindset that really had to happen. I think the other big change in mindset, both in that transition and then as you continue to move up in your roles, is effort is not really the solution, but you really need to look more at process and structure and like your pattern of things that you're doing to be successful, whether it's a workflow or whatever it may happen to be, the tools you're using, and that is really where to put your energy, because if you're already a person who works hard, working harder doesn't really get you anywhere. It just gets you more and more likely to be burnt out. How does that resonate with you?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I think right now is like a time where we're trying to figure out how things are changing so much in our industry. So it feels really applicable to challenges of today. Like, how do we utilize AI? What do we centralize? How do you look at all of your processes in a microscope? Because what worked 6 months ago might not work today. And being able to be flexible and like own that instead of being like, this was mine, this is how it worked. There's only certain fundamentals, I would say, have not changed in our business, but I feel like we're on this fast pace, quicker than ever, to just try to keep up with how much is changing as far as technology.
Yeah, we're definitely at an interesting time, and it's somewhere I've always obviously spent a lot of time thinking recently, having left the management side of the business to try and do things like Circle from an education standpoint, and also build some of the software tools that I think we don't have. As I look at the industry right now on the technology side, when people are trying to figure things out, something stands out like really starkly to me, and I think part of this is our fault as operators and property management companies being on the buy side of these products. And then it's a little bit also on the prop tech side of things with how they position the products that they're selling. Is we purchased a lot of tools, forgetting that they're just tools, that we view them as solutions, and that by adopting this AI virtual leasing agent or implementing a CRM, that it natively will just solve a lot of the problems that we have. When in reality, the tool is only valuable if it's being put in the hand of a skilled person,
Right.
who understands how to use it. And it is that. So with your company, we were just talking about this a little before we went live. How are you thinking at Belaire about the next phase of tools, or how you're trying to support your team, centralization? I know you're probably somewhat early in that process on a lot of fronts, but maybe if we think less about like the tool selection, but more the what are you hoping to accomplish? Or y'all tripled in size this year. You're having a lot of the pains of growth, and you as the leader having to start thinking about what's next. We're at 3,000 units. What are we going to need to look like when we're at 5, or when we're at 8, or 10, or 15? So how are you thinking about technology on that front, or is it more wait and see because it's moving too fast?
A little bit of both. I will say we've been pretty resistant to putting new technology in place unless I visit with my on-site teams and they tell me this is a problem and that would be a solution. Because one thing I hated in multifamily was if there was a new program rolled out or technology or something and no one was asking the on-site people. It's like, would this work for me? Is this like, am I meeting my teams where they're at? would they be able to utilize this as a tool and it be successful, or is it just another box they're going to check? And I just did a road show. I went to all my properties and just had heart to hearts. Like, where are you struggling? What can we do together right now? Instead of taking notes and, leaving with this big agenda. I knew I was going to hear about the problems, and that's exactly what I did it for. So I'm thinking, I get approached all the time by companies that are like, you need this tool, you need this technology. I integrate with your PMS. Here's why you need this. And I've very rarely said yes, even to pilot things if they're free, because I know I don't have a lot of bandwidth. My team doesn't. And I need someone that's skilled enough to give me the feedback of if it's going to be successful. And frankly, right now, we're just on fire with operational challenges. We have a lot of really struggling assets. And we specialize in the BC space. We have our first Class A deal, though. So we've gotten out of that a little bit. It is exciting. But we're worried about fraud. We're worried about getting 300 leases at a property that I took over 2 months ago that's it's almost 700 units. I need 350 leases. It's not the time for me to put technology and new tools into place necessarily. So I am excited about it and where it's going. What we're looking at right now is offloading simple tasks that take up my bandwidth or my VP's bandwidth. And that's come in the form of a VA. I'm a marketing assistant. Someone's handling our HubSpot and our LinkedIn, being able to stay present, but those aren't things I need to do specifically, or even some of my regionals would need to do. We've automated some reporting packages. I think there's so much out there I haven't taken advantage of, and I want to, but I want to be very specific that it has to help my end user, and that's the on-site team, because they need to be successful. So to be determined, I guess. Have me on again in like 6 months. I'll tell you what's changed, but I'm excited about it. But I'm also concerned about being a company that says yes, and then systems don't work. Things break. My team doesn't know how to set rates anymore. I mean, I've seen this happen with large operators, you and I both, that are like, I cram so much tech and tools into my team that they don't even know how to use a hot sheet. Like,
Yep.
What unit are we going to lease today? I mean, that's nuts to me. I would rather just be old school and do it the right way and be effective than take on the tools and then not know how to leverage and use them appropriately.
Yeah, that's I think that's pretty well said. I think we agree on pretty much on all of that. You said a couple of things that stood out to me, which is you were being very mindful of the impact on your site teams. And a lot of that, I think, is, I'll maybe add a little bit of my perspective there is, I think sometimes in our effort, two things. One, in our effort to make the job easy, we've accidentally made the job much more complex. When I worked on site, which was a long time ago, it was like 2008 to 2010, or a little bit before that, on a distributed portfolio, we just had Yardi, right? We didn't have a separate CRM. We used the baked-in CRM. We had just gotten utility billing. That was a new thing. And yeah, that was ages ago, obviously. But the job, while hard, because you had to do a bunch of different things and then to do them well, was fairly simple. It was straightforward. And today, the tasks may be easier. There's things that are doing things for us in the periphery, but the job's actually more complex. Another thing you said is that you see a lot of these at bigger companies, and really, my guess is where there's more layers between the site teams and leadership. Where we came up in the business, we were both very fortunate that the owner of the company and the EVP were on the properties like multiple times a week. So you had brilliant, great people touching the properties every day. And there's the natural thing as companies grow, that just doesn't happen anymore. So your talent gets further and further away from, or maybe your most experienced people get further and further away from where the problems are, and it's natural to get a little disconnected. And then a thing that I've heard a lot from owners, I'm curious, with the Alls Grove too, how much and you talk to a lot of property owners as well, both clients and just in general. Something I heard a lot over the past probably 6 or 7 years is it felt like the management companies were more invested in the business of the management company than they were in optimizing for the success of the properties they manage. One, have you heard anything of it similar to that? And then, even if not, like, how does that resonate with you in terms of, does that feel right? Like, you've worked at some really big companies, in your career. Does it feel like they're making decisions without really thinking about, does this positively impact NOI of the properties I manage? Or am I doing it because it helps me on the company side, which isn't to say you shouldn't do that, but you mentioned, like, with the pilots, they're free. They're not free, right? There's a cost.
Human capital.
Yeah, there's a cost in time. You have to rewrite your training content. You have to, all your LA stuff has to all be completely redone to implement those things and integrate them into how you operate properties. And that just by itself is a huge cost.
Sure.
And when you put focus on one thing, there's the opportunity. It's always going to take focus away from something else. So it feels to me like your focus and energy is really on what's going to drive property performance. And just, and that the business of Bel Air, what's good for Bel Air is going to be that the portfolio grows. And the way the portfolio is going to grow is by doing really well for your clients.
Yeah, exactly.
And that it's not necessarily about trying to optimize every dollar out of efficiency on the management side today. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, and that's really fitting for me where I'm at in my size. I mean, I think I was managing a little over 15,000 units in my previous company before I started Bel Air, and we're 3,000 units. We're nowhere near that scale today. But what I would say I'm hearing from owners and the opportunities that have come to me at Bel Air are that they're with larger operators, and those operators want them to fit in a box. Like, this is my process. These are our policies. Here's how we do it here. You're going to order from my national vendors. You're going to use these specific, processes and procedures. And I kind of blew that up. I think that's why I'm not best working for other people and working for myself, because I don't think that the right process, there's not the same thing you can do on every property that's going to work. You have to be nimble. And I will say, at first starting the company, I was a little intimidated that I didn't have the sexy pitch deck and all of the things that we had when we go into pitches when we work together. It was impressive, the amount of work we put into coming to that table and everyone having their certain thing to say and all the expertise in that room. How I'm getting business now is a one-on-one conversation. I shopped your property. Here's the deficiencies. Here's your opportunities. And I'm getting PMAs like this. And I had to learn myself that, like, I know what I'm doing. Like, I don't need all of these things. I don't need to tell someone you have to do I'm going to manage your property a certain kind of way because that's how Bel Air does it. Bel Air does what's best for the property. And I'm not at a point right now where I'm talking MSAs and like things that really work more for the management company than for the properties. I'm looking at what type of leverage can I have with size that best benefits the cost of those properties, or benefits, how we can better the NOI. Because if I don't do well on these properties, I won't grow. If I do well, I'm going to get the yes on the next deal. I'm going to get the referrals, and then we'll see business growth. And that's exactly how our business has grown this year. Is we've done well, and we've rolled up our sleeves, and we've been gritty, and we've done the hard work. And these aren't sexy deals everyone wants. That's just the reality. But I will take on a deal that's 50% occupied and put an aggressive team on it and take, however many months to stabilize. But I'm not focused on what's next. I'm focused on what is on my plate right now. And it's enough, Stephen, for probably the next 6 months.
Well, we'll see. You'll probably get, I have a feeling that what you're saying is going to resonate with a lot of people who see this. So you might be getting some calls as a byproduct. It's, you touched on a couple of things I thought were really interesting, which was, and I'll maybe clarify one thing we talked about when we were doing pitches, because the thing that made that different, in my eyes, having put all of those together and leading, getting some really big deals for what at the company at the time, was that what made those unique is that they were very nuanced. They were very bespoke and, fit and designed for that specific property. And, I think we were talking before we started about the course that I'm putting out, and the lesson that I was so excited about. I was texting you about as I was working on, because one of the things I got pretty deep in there that has been a huge emphasis and kind of talking track for me personally with the people I know in the industry the past several months is each property is unique. Like we know that we know that logically. It's like we don't like feel it, and because we don't act as if they are. A lot of times we use the same marketing strategies across properties. We use the same staffing ratios across properties instead of looking at each property and saying there's something unique here, and to operate this is going to be very different. You can think about two Class A properties. We're in a beautiful property in downtown Austin right now. It's a couple years old. There's a property across the street that's just finishing its lease up. Both Class A, both high rise, but probably actually should have very different KPIs and very different operating plans, because one is finishing a lease up and optimizing to have permanent debt put on that property either via a sale or a refinance by the developer. So they're optimizing for revenue. This property has been around for several years. This owner is probably more cash flow centric. We probably need to be, because of things like the lease ups, we need to be optimizing around retention and really driving value in NOI that way. And those require completely different operating plans. But if these two properties have the same management company, it's likely that they would be executing an identical plan. And I think that's, in my career, that's a challenge that I've seen every company as it grows struggle with. There was a weird irony to me that, when I was at Roscoe, I used a certain pitch to get business from the big incumbents like Raystar. That was very successful. When I was at ResProp, I used the exact same pitch to get business from Roscoe and now RPM Living. And not because, I'm a big fan of RPM. Like I know a lot of people there. I love Jason and a lot of people on that team. So it's not to say anything bad about them. They're a great management company. Like they wouldn't be, they're actually, just to throw a little praise their way, they're such an outlier. Like no company in the past 15 years has come from completely outside of the NMHC top 50 to number 3. All the big movers, Asset Living, when we were at Roscoe and before you were there, I think had like 5,000 units. Asset Living was already in the top 50. It was another one of the big movers of the past couple of years. 35 was already in the top 50. They had a little bit of an advantage from being basically, Riverstone reborn. But no companies come from outside. I mean, in 2010, that company had 1,000 units. That's wild. And that's a credit to them. It's a credit to the density of talent that was built there. We talked about CPM earlier. I give Jason a lot of credit for constantly investing in people.
Oh.
And, we had two people working in training when we had 3,000 units. It was insane. Like you have 2 dedicated people who did nothing but training.
You're making me feel behind.
Well, it's not behind. It's just, it was a recognition that I'm trying to build something big, and we have to have, and even if it puts us, I'm not trying to make money on management now. I'm playing the long game. I'm playing the 30-year game, not the 3-year game. And that paid such dividends, and it's really incredible to see what they've grown into, and really happy for all the people there. But also happy they got so big that, there was some management that changed hands. So it's a tough business. But I think with all of that, and my kind of roundabout way to get back to this is putting your owners first, recognizing who your customer is. Like who should we be optimizing for? I'll throw something else at your way from a book I read. It's the Sam Walton biography. And they did some things with their warehouses and how they were arranged as a company to shorten shipping times so they could have products delivered faster for cheaper, allow them to cut prices significantly. As part of why Walmart grew so much was actually their infrastructure and distribution system. So what does that have to do with property management? The CFO at the time wanted to keep that savings for the company as profits. Sam Walton was insistent that they pass that to their customer. because that's where their growth was going to come from. And I think that's for, people who are watching, whether live, which I don't know if anyone actually is because my computer's going crazy. But if you see this after the fact, the idea that we need to remember who our customer is, and that having that longer term vision of we're a 3,000 unit company, then I could try to squeeze every bit of juice out of this with its preferred vendor things and this and that and otherwise, or have smaller teams, or maybe run my regional spreads up a lot, of something a lot of companies do. The idea of regional having 10 properties just boggles my mind, because I don't know how you do that effectively, how you do that job well with 10, and some have 12. It's mind blowing to me.
And in this type of industry right now where everything's distressed,
Yep.
I have regionals with 3 properties. I never built this business model thinking I would have twice the amount of people running half the amount of deals.
But how is that? I think that's important though, because you made that change, and you mentioned distressed properties. I remember one of the things when we were working together previously, we had a count where we didn't want to reach more than 5 or 6, but then renovations counted for 1.5 or 2.
Right.
And,
Or lease up would
yeah.
be 2.
And I think a distressed asset also counts as 1.5 or 2 because it's going to require that much more time. So how has we've spoken a lot about the results. So how else have you really seen the benefit or been thinking about intentionally keeping those small? And to your point, having more staff than you expected because it's what's needed versus kind of what's convenient or what makes the most sense today versus long term.
Yeah, I just assess what our business plans are per deal, and I know that my regionals need to be on site with those teams. They cannot manage this behind the computer, and they cannot be at 5 properties a week. Some of them, they're at multiple properties or multiple visits to one property in a week. There's more high touch in my company than I ever remember having as an RM, but I also believe when I was in that part of my career, we were riding such a high. You would be good, you would do well in a deal whether you were a great management company or not, and that's just not the reality today.
Yeah, it's different market.
There's so much more of supply than demand, and there's not a lot of qualified residents like we had previously. It's just everything, as much as we have these tools and stuff to help with having those touch points digitally, I still need my managers and sometimes my regionals to be the ones picking up the phone, calling someone saying your lease is coming up and I would really love for you to renew. I mean, it's not the note on the door, here's the $100 increase, and I expect to not get the notice. And so we cultivate that in our leadership structure, and that culture has to come from down, our top down. And so I don't see a world that I'm going to be able to double up with these regionals on the types of properties I'm managing for the next 2-3 years. I'm just expecting that any profits that we make in our company are going right back into personnel. And that might be professional education. That might be hiring more people to manage less deals. I'm hoping to cultivate kind of a ramp program, moving up some people that are managers into assistant regionals and giving them a little bit more responsibility and growing them in their career, because someone on a 700 unit property could be a regional. I ran that many units as a regional over several deals. So I really see the value of having these smaller plates. It's not that they have less to do by any means. It's just they have to be really focused on specifically targeting what are our goals and what was our roadmap to get there, and where did we fail and how do we adjust, so that my managers and regionals have confidence getting on the calls with their clients, because this is a hard environment and these are not easy calls. But if we're getting double-digit leasing, it makes it a lot easier to ask a client for money because we need to turn units because we lease so many units, So it all cycles together. And I try to have that mentality from a leadership stance that we're doing what we need to do, and telling my regionals, you're not measuring your success over how many units you have. We're measuring your success on how we're moving the dial on the NOI, and I'm compensating with a little bit more of a different of a bonus structure than what I ever had in the industry either, because I want to keep my teams incentivized, but letting them know the importance of being on the properties and having that high touch. And most of my managers and all of my regionals never worked in a recession. They've never seen this kind of environment. So if you weren't in the business in 2008,
Yeah.
you have no idea what we're going through right now. And it's hard because there's been so much fast tracking and advancement in the last decade. My regionals are even struggling, my best ones. So
yeah, that's very true. And I'm glad you brought that up, that the industry was easy from about 2012 to early 23, where it really obfuscated, the quality of management because demand was high. It was really actually less about demand. I think it was more about the money was cheap. Interest rates were super low, and sorry, I kicked a Red Bull. Don't know how nothing came out of the can. It's amazing. But money was cheap. We didn't have clients who were seeing their debt service, skyrocket, in some cases double. Insurance costs have gone through the roof over the past 5 years. We've had a lot of factors that have made our job hard again, for the first time since probably 2008. And it's challenging because we have a generation of management professionals who didn't have the benefit of some of the mentors that we had, who didn't really care. Like the bar was the bar. And there was a expectation of process and how we went about things, more so than it was about being great as individuals, more so than being, great on these kind of vanity metrics. And I love how you brought that back to your regionals. You have them focus on NOI. We touched on that a little bit earlier, that's, really ultimately the metric. And there's a lot of companies that, look at what I've started calling vanity metrics, like work order closeout or compliance, scores and that sort of thing, that for none of that matters. Like, and you can optimize for those, and people tend to do that. Like I know my last company, we had a maintenance tech who was very honest when he said the reason he closes out unfinished work orders is to get his bonus, and which was appreciated, the candor. But what? Like, but that's it. And so like that, I don't blame him, right? It was the incentives were on, and I think for you, keeping that focus is going to pay massive dividends, because I know it has for me in my career, both together in sense where that's really what owners are looking for. And like for regionals or VPs, anyone who's watching, like, I think that's really important to internalize and take in, is just that understanding that, that's our customer. Our job, we're hired to drive the bus. We're hired to help them achieve their goals. Now, we're the trusted advisor, so sometimes owners have unrealistic expectations, and it's important to push back, but push back with alternatives and push back with solutions, and more importantly, push back with data. Like, don't just say because, right? Like, we all hated when our parents did that. Like, just don't be that person. And be, be a partner in that process. And I would bet with your regionals that one of the other big benefits of the smaller number of properties is that they're getting a chance to really cultivate their process and like how they're going to go about being a regional. Because I know like you and I operate very differently, and that's fine. It's everyone. You have to adapt to your skills, and then surround yourself with a team that's complementary of those skills to fill in the gaps, because none of us can do everything. And you're giving your teams the chance and grace and a little bit of space with only having a handful of properties to find that for themselves. And really, in your case, they're going to be very battle tested. As they come out the other side of this, they're going to be probably have a lot of confidence that whatever's thrown at us, we can figure out. But if they had 6 properties or 8 properties, there'd be no chance.
Yeah, absolutely.
They'd just be running in circles all the time.
Something we do expect is that they are drilling into all of the details, and I tell them that you don't have a huge load, so you should know every one of these metrics. And even though our managers send out we have an internal property performance report that goes out every Monday, asking our regionals to double back. Like, do these numbers make sense? Is the math mathing? Because when we get on the phone with the client, we should know 101 was turned this week and the reason why 105 didn't lease this week and how many pieces of traffic and what exactly was our reason for not closing. And it's almost like when I was growing up in the industry, this is what you went through on like a lease up, like a really stressed, like, this is our first lease up in the company. Like, you better knock it out of the park. My teams are doing that constantly. And I believe because we had great mentorship and they gave us the why behind everything, that that's what I need to do for my teams too. And so we're working with our clients on reworks. We're working on loan modifications. We're putting together action plans, and we better meet up because now it's our reputation and it's our ability for our client to save their deal.
Yeah.
And a lot of my regionals managers, they've never been through this. They don't know what that's like. I've gone through foreclosures. We've put action plans together and said, here's what we're going to get if you, lender, give us the escrow reserve. We need that money, defer our mortgage. Here's how we're going to apply it. And then the monitoring and enforcement of that is really where myself and my VP come in place, because we help our teams and guide through this very detailed plan. But then we have to make sure that the dial keeps going forward every week.
Yep. And that you're in one of those roles that's making sure things get done, versus being the one who does it. And it sounds like your regionals are also very much in that same mix. And it's awesome that they're getting exposed to so much. And I love that your comment on the why, because it's when you only know how, then it's really easy to just say, I can do it later. And it's really easy to allow recency bias to creep in. We work in very distraction-rich environments, especially on site in the industry, where residents coming in, prospects coming in, and a struggling property. You might have inspectors coming in. You don't have too much money. You're chasing rent. There's all these things that you have to do. And so your inbox is just flashing constantly, saying, "Pay attention to me. Pay attention to me." And by the way, I'm a big hater of email. It's the worst thing that's ever happened to business. But you have all these distractions, and it's really hard then to prioritize where you need to spend your time. Like as a manager, and for those of you who haven't been on site for a while who might be watching this, and those of you who are on site, I'm sure this completely resonates with you. You're looking at a dashboard with 87 things you can click. You have all these things vying for your attention, and deciding, what do I do next, is a huge challenge. And choosing the right thing, or maybe not necessarily the right thing, the ideal thing, like the optimized thing for the goals you're trying to achieve, doesn't happen a lot. And that's where we get behind, whether it's behind on vendor payments, whether it's behind on reporting, whether it's behind on walking the property, right? Like, it's very easy to sit in an office on site and work all day and get nothing actually done. So that's why having to be there as a regional manager, having to be at your sites to help, that's really your role there, is to keep those priorities set, and to keep your teams kind of with their North Star headed the right direction, as opposed to getting maybe distracted or having those days where you work really hard and really accomplish nothing. And I love hearing that, and that's I think it speaks to the success that you've had, why you've been continuing to grow, why you're getting trusted by lenders and other groups to take on these big turnarounds. It's really because of that bespoke, customized management plan for each property that is the only way those things get turned around. So we are, I think, up against it on time and on battery. But I don't know, any closing thoughts? I have no idea if we had anybody in the chat or watching live, because my computer hates the internet here. And I didn't want to fool with it again and have the screen go all wonky. But I don't know, big takeaways, anything that resonated with you from this episode, anything you want to maybe share with people that are seeing this after the fact?
I just want to give some encouragement, especially if you're in the thick of it on distressed deals. You are just really challenged right now on a property level, that this too will pass. Like, this is a really tough time to be in the industry. I'm spending a lot of time normalizing hard conversations, like why we aren't paying this vendor and how do we make better decisions on, what type of money we're spending on our properties, and like treat your bank accounts for your properties like they're yours, and how would you allocate those funds? How strategic are you going to be? And ask somebody to be your mentor if you haven't already. This is my biggest mentor right here. So I'm really grateful for that. And I think that getting plugged into the circle and just really getting involved in this network is going to be huge. So I'm excited to look back at this like 10 years from now and be like, remember when we sat on the couch at that property and
When it was first getting started.
yeah, I mean, this is a really tough time. I just think that, like, in general, people are not well, and like taking care of yourself, showing up as your best self every day. What is free is our attitude and the way that we approach our residents and how we show up. So whether you're, wherever you are in your career, I know you'll see this as a building block moving forward, and you'll be proud of the successes that you had in this environment because they're hard to come by right now.
Yeah, I think that was really well said. I would just maybe echo a little bit of it's important to give yourself grace. And maybe tweak one thing that you said of, you can't necessarily, you only be your best self that you can be that day, but that best self is going to be different from day to day. And you can't be necessarily hard on yourself for that because stuff happens in life. Sometimes you just don't sleep as well. Sometimes you have a lot going on. Like there's a bunch of things that go on that impact us, and we can only be as good as we can be. But you're not alone in this. And I think that's the most important thing to remember is ask for help. There's professional organizations, there's Circle, hopefully, which some of y'all, if you either are aware of or are getting connected to through this, the intention of that is supposed to be a place for people where they can ask their peers for their advice or their recommendations, or even just vent or blow off, oh my God, I had to deal with this today. Because we all need that sometimes. And also try to, as best you can, find the opportunity in the challenges we face. Because as Amanda said so well, this too shall pass. And at some point you'll look back on this and it's always been helpful for me to find the lessons in those things. Like most of the hard things I've encountered in my life, I look back on and I'm grateful for today. I definitely wasn't grateful for them in the moment. But as I got through them, that's part of what made me capable as a property manager. It's why I'm able to do a lot of the things that I'm able to do. So I wouldn't change any of it. So appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And we will definitely do this again as we go. We had answers for us. I don't know if we had any answers for them, but that's kind of the premise of the whole thing is we might have answers.
We'll find out after this.
Yeah, we'll find out afterwards. So thank you to anyone who watched live. We will figure out the chat and everything for next time. So apologies there if anyone did put in questions. If there are questions that we missed that were submitted, we'll compile them afterwards and do like a LinkedIn post with those questions and our answers for those, just to make sure we pay off those requests from you. And everyone have a great week. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Tick-tock, tick-tock, the day drags on. Your brain's on fire with questions galore. From angry tenants to that weird stain on the floor. Counting seconds till our show comes on. We might have answers. Yes, that's our name. Your burning questions are why we came. We'll fix your problems, or at least we'll try. It's time for our show. Let your troubles fly. Marketing blues got you feeling low, wondering how to make those vacancies go. Career ladder looking mighty steep. Tune into our show, no need to weep. We might have answers, yes, that's our name. Your burning questions are why we came. troubles fly.